I was standing in the middle of Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, with nothing but a carry-on suitcase, my phone, my passport, and exactly 47 euros in my wallet. It was 11:30 at night. The terminal was half empty, and I had just watched my husband of 14 years drive away in a black Mercedes with a woman I had never seen before, leaving me stranded in a country where I barely spoke the language. My name is Elizabeth Renee Morrison. I am 42 years old, and 72 hours from that moment, I would own the company my husband had spent 2 decades building. But standing there in that airport, watching the taillights disappear into the Parisian night, I had no idea that was coming. All I knew was that I had been betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable, and I had a choice to make. I could fall apart, or I could fight back. Let me back up and tell you how I got there. My husband's name was Donovan Mitchell Morrison. When we met, I was 24 years old, fresh out of graduate school with an MBA from Howard University, working as a junior analyst at a consulting firm in Washington, D.C. Donovan was 32, already successful, running a boutique financial services company that specialized in helping tech startups manage their capital and navigate acquisition deals. He was brilliant, charismatic, and he pursued me with the kind of focused intensity that made me feel like the most important person in the world. We got married within a year. It felt like a fairy tale. For the first few years, it was good. I worked alongside him, helping build the business. I brought in clients, structured deals, managed relationships. And Donovan always told people that I was his secret weapon, that I had instincts for people and numbers that he could never replicate. We built Morrison Strategic Capital together, from a small 2-person operation to a firm with 20 employees and clients across 3 continents. By the time we hit our 10th anniversary, we were generating $30 million in annual revenue. We had a beautiful home in Silver Spring, Maryland. We traveled. We talked about having children, though we kept putting it off because the business was growing so fast, and there was always one more deal, one more client, one more expansion opportunity. And then, slowly, things started to shift. Donovan began traveling more frequently without me. Business trips to San Francisco, Austin, London, Singapore. Trips that he said I did not need to be on because they were routine client check-ins or exploratory meetings that did not require both of us. I believed him because I trusted him, and because I was busy running operations back home, managing the team, keeping clients happy. I did not question it when he started working late more often, when his phone was suddenly always face down on the table, when he became irritable if I asked too many questions about his day. I should have seen the signs. Looking back now, they were everywhere. But when you love someone, when you have built a life with them, you explain away the things that do not add up. You tell yourself you are being paranoid, insecure, unreasonable. You gaslight yourself before anyone else has to. The trip to Paris was supposed to be for both of us. See, a luxury tech conference where Donovan was scheduled to speak on a panel about early-stage funding strategies, followed by a week of vacation to celebrate our 14th anniversary. I had been looking forward to it for months. We had not taken a real vacation in over 2 years, and I thought this would be a chance to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place, to talk seriously about finally starting a family now that the business was stable. We flew out together, business class on Air France. Donovan was distracted the whole flight, typing on his laptop, taking calls before we had to switch to airplane mode, barely speaking to me except to ask me to order him another scotch. I told myself he was nervous about the panel, that once the conference was over, he would relax, and we would have our time together. We checked into a beautiful hotel in the 8th arrondissement, one of those classic Parisian places with ornate moldings and a view of the Eiffel Tower from our room. Donovan's panel was the next morning. That evening, we had dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant he had reserved months in advance. The food was exquisite, but Donovan was on his phone the entire time, typing emails, excusing himself twice to take calls. I sat there feeling invisible, wondering when I had become so unimportant to him. The next day, the conference went well. Donovan was brilliant on his panel, commanding the room the way he always did, making complex financial concepts accessible and engaging. I sat in the audience feeling proud of him, despite the distance between us. Afterward, there was a cocktail reception where we networked with other attendees, venture capitalists, startup founders, investors. Donovan worked the room, shaking hands, exchanging cards, laughing at jokes. I stood beside him, playing the supportive wife, smiling until my face hurt. And that is when I saw them. Donovan and a woman, standing slightly apart from the main crowd, talking in a way that was too familiar, too intimate. She was beautiful, younger than me by at least 10 years, with smooth dark skin and an elegance that made me feel frumpy in my carefully chosen dress. The way Donovan looked at her, the way his hand rested on the small of her back, the way she laughed at something he said and touched his arm, it all clicked into place with a sickening clarity. I walked over to them, my heart pounding. Donovan saw me coming and his expression shifted, just for a second, before he recovered and smiled. "Elizabeth, there you are," he said, as if he had been looking for me. "This is Simone Laurent. She runs a venture fund in Paris. Simone, this is my wife, Elizabeth." Simone extended her hand, and I shook it because what else was I supposed to do? Her grip was firm, confident. Up close, I could see that she was not just beautiful, but sharp, the kind of woman who commanded rooms and closed deals. "It is a pleasure to meet you," Simone said in lightly accented English. "Donovan has told me so much about the work you do together." The lie was so smooth, I almost believed it. But I saw the truth in the way Donovan would not quite meet my eyes, in the way Simone's hand lingered just a moment too long in his before she pulled away. "Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Say if you are already invested in this story, if you can feel the knot forming in your stomach the same way I felt it forming in mine, standing there in that conference hall, then hit that subscribe button right now. Here is the truth most people do not want to hear. Over 70% of the people watching Philly Folktales videos right now have not subscribed to this channel. You watch, you feel every emotion, you get completely absorbed in these stories, and then you move on without joining our community. Do not be one of those people. Subscribe right now and become part of the Philly Folktales family. Smash that like button, because it genuinely helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, London, Amsterdam. I want to hear from every single one of you. Because what I did in the next 72 hours, the way I turned betrayal into triumph, is something you will never forget. I made it through the rest of the reception on autopilot, smiling and nodding and making small talk while my mind raced. That night, back at the hotel, I confronted Donovan. I asked him directly if he was having an affair with Simone. He denied it, of course. He told me I was being ridiculous, that Simone was a professional contact, that I was ruining our anniversary trip with paranoid accusations. He was so convincing that for a moment I almost believed him. Almost. But I had not built a successful business by ignoring my instincts. So while Donovan was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I went through his phone. He had left it charging on the nightstand, and he had gotten careless, or maybe arrogant. It was not locked. I opened his messages and I saw everything. Months of texts between him and Simone. Not just romantic messages, though there were plenty of those, but business conversations, plans, strategies. And then I found the email thread that made my blood run cold. Donovan and Simone had been planning for over 6 months to start a new company together in Paris. They were going to poach our biggest clients, transfer key assets from Morrison Strategic Capital into the new entity, and leave me with a hollowed-out shell of the business we had built together. And they were going to do it in a way that was technically legal, using corporate structures and offshore accounts that would make it nearly impossible for me to fight back. See, the plan was meticulous. Donovan had been working with lawyers and accountants to set everything up while I was back in D.C. running the day-to-day operations, completely oblivious. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every email, every document I could find. I sent them to myself at an email address Donovan did not know about. And then, I put his phone back exactly where I had found it, and I sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to throw up. Donovan came out of the shower, saw me sitting there, and immediately knew something was wrong. "Elizabeth, what is it?" he asked, but his voice had an edge to it, wary. "I know," I said quietly. "I know about Simone. I know about the new company. I know about all of it." For a moment, Donovan just stared at me. Then his expression hardened into something I had never seen before. Cold. Calculating. "So you went through my phone," he said. "That is a violation of privacy, Elizabeth." The audacity of that statement, given what he had been doing, almost made me laugh. Almost. "You are stealing our company," I said. "You are planning to leave me with nothing after I spent 14 years building this business with you." "Our company?" Donovan said, and there was genuine contempt in his voice now. "Elizabeth, let me be very clear. Morrison Strategic Capital is my company. It has my name on it. I brought in the majority of the clients. I structured the deals. You helped, and I appreciate that, but do not confuse assistance with ownership." "We built it together," I said, and I hated how my voice shook. "I have worked just as hard as you." "You do not have the talent I have," Donovan said, and the cruelty in his voice was like a physical blow. "You are good at operations, at keeping things running, but you do not have the vision, the strategic mind, the relationships. Without me, you are nothing, and you are certainly not equipped to fight me on this." "We are married," I said. "We have a partnership. You cannot just—" "We will get divorced," Donovan said, cutting me off. "You can have the house. I will give you a settlement, something fair. But the company is mine, Elizabeth, and if you try to fight me on that, I will bury you in legal fees. I have lawyers in 3 countries working on this. You do not have the resources or the knowledge to stand against me." I looked at this man I had loved, had trusted, had built a life with, and I saw him clearly for the first time. He had never seen me as a partner. I had been useful to him, valuable labor, but never an equal. And now that he had found someone he thought was better, someone with a European pedigree and a venture fund, and the kind of sophistication he apparently valued more than 14 years of loyalty and hard work, he was discarding me like I was replaceable. "Get out," I said. "What?" Donovan looked genuinely surprised. "Get out of this room. Go to Simone. I do not want to see you right now." Donovan laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Elizabeth, you are in Paris. You do not speak French. You have no money of your own. I said get out!" My voice came out louder than I intended, sharp enough that Donovan actually took a step back. He stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Fine. I will be back tomorrow to take you to the airport. Your flight home is at 3. I suggest you use the time to think about whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way." He grabbed his jacket and his phone and walked out, leaving me alone in that beautiful hotel room with its view of the Eiffel Tower and its promise of romance that had curdled into betrayal. I did not sleep that night. I spent hours going through every screenshot I had taken, reading every message, every email, trying to understand the full scope of what Donovan had planned. And the more I read, the more I realized something important. Donovan had made mistakes. He was brilliant, but he was also arrogant. He assumed I would never find out, or that if I did, I would be too hurt, too intimidated, too financially dependent to fight back. He had underestimated me completely. By the time the sun came up over Paris, I had made a decision. I was not going home. I was not going to accept whatever settlement Donovan decided was fair. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. I left the hotel at 7 in the morning, checking out and paying the bill with the credit card that was still in my name. Donovan had not thought to cancel it yet. I took the metro to the business district and found an internet cafe where I could use a computer. I spent the next 6 hours researching French corporate law, international business structures, and the lawyers and accountants Donovan had been working with, and I started making calls. Donovan called my phone repeatedly. I did not answer. He sent texts demanding to know where I was, telling me I was being childish, warning me that I was making things harder for myself. I ignored all of them. By 3 in the afternoon, the time my flight was supposed to depart, I had hired a lawyer. Her name was Marguerite Chen, a French-American attorney who specialized in international business disputes. I had found her through a legal directory and cold called her office, explaining my situation in the most concise terms possible. She agreed to meet with me that evening. Marguerite's office was in a modern building in the financial district. She was in her 50s, elegant and sharp-eyed, and she listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she asked to see the screenshots. I showed her everything. She went through them methodically, occasionally making notes, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up at me. "Mrs. Morrison, your husband has made several critical errors. First, many of these communications discuss transferring assets that legally belong to your joint company, using methods that could be considered fraudulent misrepresentation. Second, he has shared confidential client information with a third party without proper authorization. Third, his plan to strip assets from Morrison's strategic capital while leaving you as a partial owner exposes him to significant liability under both American and French law." "Can I stop him?" I asked. "You can do more than stop him," Marguerite said. "If you are willing to fight, and if you trust me to guide this process, I believe we can not only prevent the theft of your company's assets, but potentially gain control of the entire operation. But it will require speed, precision, and a willingness to play hardball. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Donovan's face when he told me I was nothing without him. I thought about 14 years of my life, of work and sacrifice and partnership that he had been planning to throw away for a younger woman and a more exciting opportunity. I thought about every late night I had worked, every client I had brought in, every problem I had solved, while Donovan took credit and accolades. "Yes," I said, "I am prepared." "Then we start now," Marguerite said. "First, we need to freeze the company's accounts before your husband can move any more money. Second, we need to notify your major clients about the potential fraud. Third, we need to file emergency injunctions in both France and the United States. And we need to do all of this before your husband realizes you are not on that plane back to DC." We worked through the night. Marguerite brought in 2 associates and a forensic accountant. We drafted legal documents, prepared evidence, made strategic calls. It was like being in war room, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Focused, competent, powerful. By dawn the next morning, we had filed injunctions in both countries. The accounts were frozen, and I had personally called our 3 biggest clients to inform them that there had been fraudulent activity involving their confidential information, and that I was taking steps to protect their interests. All 3 immediately put their contracts on hold pending investigation. Donovan must have found out shortly after that, because my phone started ringing again. This time I answered. "What did you do?" Donovan's voice was shaking with rage. "Elizabeth, what the hell did you do?" "I protected our company," I said calmly. "The company we built together, the one you were planning to steal." "You cannot do this," Donovan said. "You do not have the authority." "Actually, I do. I am a 50% owner of Morrison Strategic Capital, and I have evidence that you were planning to commit fraud against our clients and against me. So I did what any responsible business owner would do. I stopped you." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Donovan's voice came back, colder now. "You have made a huge mistake. I will destroy you for this." "Try," I said, and I hung up. 72 hours after Donovan left me at Charles de Gaulle Airport, I walked into an emergency shareholders meeting in a conference room in downtown Paris. Marguerite had arranged it, working with the French court system to compel Donovan's attendance. He sat across the table from me with his own attorney, a slick French lawyer named Bernard, something who looked like he had never lost a case and was not planning to start now. Simone sat beside Donovan, and the hatred in her eyes when she looked at me was almost comical. She had thought I would disappear quietly. She had been wrong. Also present were representatives from our three biggest clients who had been invited by the court as interested parties given the nature of the allegations. And there was a mediator appointed by the French commercial court, a stern-looking woman named Judge Delacroix, who made it very clear from the outset that she was not interested in marital drama, only in resolving the business dispute. Marguerite stood and presented our case with devastating precision. She laid out the evidence of Donovan's plan to strip assets from Morrison's strategic capital. She showed the emails where he discussed transferring client relationships to the new Paris-based entity without the client's knowledge or consent. She presented communications where Donovan had shared confidential client information with Simone, who had no legal right to access it. And she showed the corporate structure Donovan had created, designed specifically to leave me with worthless stock in a company he had deliberately bankrupted. It was damning. The client representatives looked furious. Sir Bernard tried to object, to argue that the communications were being taken out of context, but Marguerite had done her homework. Every claim was backed by documentation. Every accusation was supported by Donovan's own words. Then Marguerite dropped the bomb I had not seen coming. Your Honor, Mrs. Morrison is not merely seeking to prevent the theft of company assets. She is seeking full control of Morrison's strategic capital based on breach of fiduciary duty. Mr. Morrison, as a 50% owner and the public face of the company, owed a duty of loyalty to both the company and to his business partner. By planning to strip assets and destroy the company's reputation for personal gain, he has violated that duty. Under both Maryland and French commercial law, such a violation can result in forfeiture of ownership stake. I stared at Marguerite. We had discussed freezing assets, preventing the theft, maybe forcing a buyout. But taking full ownership? That had never been mentioned. Marguerite caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. Trust me. Bernard was on his feet, objecting loudly in a mixture of French and English. Judge Delacroix silenced him with a raised hand. Let me be very clear, Judge Delacroix said, in accented but perfect English. This court's jurisdiction is limited to the emergency injunction and the question of asset freezing. However, I can make findings of fact that will be admissible in subsequent proceedings in the United States, and based on the evidence presented here today, I'm prepared to find that Mr. Morrison engaged in intentional misconduct designed to defraud both his business partner and his clients. She looked at Donovan with something close to contempt. Mr. Morrison, you came to France to conduct business. You used French corporate structures to facilitate what appears to be fraud. You involved French citizens and French financial institutions in your scheme. This court takes such matters very seriously. Donovan's face had gone gray. Beside him, Simone looked like she wanted to disappear. Judge Delacroix continued. I am going to give you a choice, Mr. Morrison. You can fight these allegations in a lengthy public legal battle that will be conducted in both French and American courts, that will destroy your professional reputation, and that will likely result in criminal referrals for fraud. Sire, you can negotiate a settlement here and now that resolves this matter. What kind of settlement? Bernard asked, and I could hear the defeat in his voice. He knew they had lost. Judge Delacroix looked at Marguerite. Counselor? Marguerite stood again. Mrs. Morrison is prepared to offer the following terms. Mr. Morrison will transfer his entire ownership stake in Morrison's strategic capital to Mrs. Morrison, effective immediately. In exchange, Mrs. Morrison will not pursue criminal charges for fraud, will not seek damages for breach of fiduciary duty, and will release Mr. Morrison from any further claims related to the business. This is a one-time offer, valid for the next 30 minutes. The room went silent. I looked at Donovan and saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. That is absurd, Bernard said. High, but his voice lacked conviction. You are asking my client to surrender a company worth millions for nothing. I am asking your client to avoid prison, Marguerite said calmly. The alternative is that we proceed with full litigation, including criminal referrals in both countries. I have already prepared the referral documents. They will be filed this afternoon if we do not reach a settlement. Donovan leaned over and whispered urgently to Bernard. Simone joined the conversation, her voice rising enough that I could hear snatches of angry French. Bernard shook his head repeatedly, clearly trying to explain to them that they did not have a better option. 20 minutes later, Donovan signed the papers. I watched his hand shake as he transferred ownership of Morrison Strategic Capital to me, watched the fury and humiliation in his eyes as he made each signature. And I felt something I had not expected. Not triumph, not joy, but a cold, clear satisfaction. This was justice, not revenge, though it might look like that to Donovan, but justice for 14 years of my work being dismissed and devalued. Justice for being treated as disposable. Justice for every woman who had ever built something alongside a man, only to have him try to steal it when he found someone he thought was better. When it was done, Judge Delacroix notarized the documents and declared the matter settled. Mrs. Morrison, you now have full ownership of Morrison Strategic Capital. I suggest you return to the United States and formalize these arrangements under Maryland law as quickly as possible. Mr. Morrison, you are free to pursue whatever business opportunities you wish, but you will do so without any claim to the company you attempted to defraud. This proceeding is concluded. We stood. Donovan would not look at me. Simone glared at me with pure hatred, but I did not care. Let her have him. He had shown her exactly who he was, and if she chose to stay with a man capable of that level of betrayal and fraud, that was her problem, not mine. I walked out of that conference room as the sole owner of a company that 72 hours earlier I had believed I was going to lose. Marguerite and I went to a cafe nearby, and she ordered champagne despite the fact that it was barely noon. How did you do that? I asked. How did you know they would settle? I did not know for certain, Marguerite admitted, but I knew several things. First, the evidence was overwhelming. Second, the clients were present and clearly angry, which meant their testimony would support our case. Third, Donovan and his lawyer friend underestimated you catastrophically. They thought you would go home crying. They did not expect you to hire a lawyer within hours. They did not expect you to move so quickly. By the time they realized you were serious, we had already frozen the assets and filed the injunctions. They had no good moves left. He told me I was nothing without him, I said. Men like your husband always underestimate the women beside them, Marguerite said. They take credit for joint work. They convince themselves that their partners are assistants rather than equals, and then they are genuinely shocked when those women demonstrate competence and strength. You built that company as much as he did, Elizabeth. You just finally made him acknowledge it. I flew back to Washington, D.C. 2 days later, with signed, notarized documents giving me full ownership of Morrison Strategic Capital. I had spent one more day in Paris with Marguerite, formalizing the arrangements, ensuring everything was airtight, preparing for whatever legal challenges Donovan might mount once he recovered from the shock. But Marguerite was confident he would not fight. He knew he had committed fraud. He knew the evidence was solid. Fighting would only expose him to criminal liability and destroy what remained of his reputation in the industry. When I walked into the office of Morrison Strategic Capital in Silver Spring, the staff had no idea what had happened. I called an all-hands meeting and explained that there had been a change in ownership structure, that Donovan was no longer with the company, and that I would be serving as sole CEO going forward. I saw the shock on some faces, the confusion on others. Several of our senior people had worked primarily with Donovan and were clearly uncertain about what this meant for them. I know this is unexpected, I said. I know some of you are worried about what happens next. So let me be very clear. This company was built on strong client relationships, solid financial strategies, and a reputation for integrity. Nothing about that changes. What changes is that we will no longer be complicit in activities that compromise our clients' trust or that violate our fiduciary duties. Some of you may have been aware of plans to start a competing entity in Paris. Those plans are canceled, Anyone who was involved in those discussions and wishes to pursue opportunities elsewhere is free to do so. But if you stay committed to this company and to doing right by our clients. Is that understood? There were nods around the room. A few people looked uncomfortable, and I suspected they had been part of Donovan's inner circle on the Paris venture. Over the next week, 3 of them resigned. I let them go without resistance. I did not need people who could not be trusted. The first month was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, meeting with every client personally, reassuring them that their interests were protected, that Morrison Strategic Capital remained committed to excellence. So I brought in an outside auditor to review all our accounts and ensure there had been no other irregularities. I restructured the management team, promoting people who had been loyal and competent, bringing in new talent where needed. And slowly, the company stabilized. Clients who had been ready to leave decided to stay. New clients, hearing about the transition and impressed by the way I had handled the crisis, reached out. Within 3 months, we had not only retained our existing business, but had signed 4 new major clients. Donovan tried to interfere once. He sent a letter through his attorney demanding a buyout of his ownership stake, claiming the settlement had been signed under duress. Marguerite responded with a letter that was 2 pages of legal citations and concluded with a reminder that we still had the option of filing criminal fraud charges if he continued to harass me. We never heard from him again. 6 months after I took full ownership of Morrison Strategic Capital, I rebranded the company. It was now called Morrison Renee Strategic Partners, incorporating my middle name and emphasizing the collaborative, partnership-focused approach we would take going forward. I hired 3 new junior partners, all women, all brilliant, all people who had been overlooked by traditional finance firms because they did not fit the old boys club model. And I made it a point to mentor them the way I wished someone had mentored me, treating them as genuine equals, giving them credit for their work, building them up rather than tearing them down. The company thrived. By the end of the first year, under my sole leadership, we had increased revenue by 40%. By the end of the second year, we had opened an office in San Francisco and were being courted by some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley. I was not working 18-hour days anymore. I had learned to delegate, to build a team I could trust, to create systems that did not require me to be involved in every decision. I had also started therapy, working through the trauma of the betrayal, learning to trust again, rebuilding my sense of self-worth that Donovan had spent years eroding. 2 years after the Paris disaster, I was featured in a Forbes article about women transforming the financial services industry. The article detailed my story, though I had asked them to keep some of the more personal details private. It focused instead on the business turnaround, the innovative strategies we were using, the culture of mentorship and collaboration I had built. The day the article came out, I received an email from Donovan. It was the first time he had contacted me directly since the settlement. Elizabeth, it read, I saw the Forbes article. Congratulations on your success. I want you to know that I have had time to reflect on what happened between us, and I realize now that I treated you badly. You deserved better. You were always more talented than I gave you credit for. I hope you can forgive me someday. Donovan. I read the email 3 times. Then I deleted it without responding. Forgiveness was not something Donovan was entitled to just because he had finally realized I was competent. Forgiveness was something I would work toward on my own timeline, in my own way, not because he asked for it, but because I deserved to be free of the anger and hurt. 3 years after Paris, I was sitting in my office overlooking the Potomac River when my assistant buzzed to tell me that someone named Simone Laurent was on the line asking to speak with me. I almost told my assistant to take a message, but curiosity got the better of me. Put her through, I said. Simone's voice came on the line, and she sounded different than I remembered. Smaller, tired. Elizabeth, thank you for taking my call. I know I have no right to contact you. You are right, I said. You do not. What do you want? There was a pause. Then Simone said, I wanted to apologize for my role in what Donovan did to you. I knew he was married. I knew what we were planning was wrong. I told myself it was just business, that the marriage was already over, that I was not responsible for his choices. But I was wrong. I participated in something cruel and dishonest, and I'm sorry. I did not know what to say. Of all the things I had expected from this call, a genuine apology was not one of them. What happened with you and Donovan? I asked, not because I cared, but because I was genuinely curious. Simone laughed, but it was bitter. He left me 6 months after Paris, found someone else, someone younger, someone he thought would be more useful to his next venture. I realized too late that I had not been special to him. I had just been convenient, the same way you had been. He is incapable of seeing women as partners. We are all just tools to him, useful until we are not. I am sorry that happened to you, I said, and I meant it. But I am not sure what you want from me. Nothing, Simone said. I just wanted you to know that I see now what you must have seen. And I wanted to say that what you did, taking control of the company, fighting back, that took courage I did not have. You should be proud of yourself. We talked for a few more minutes, and by the end of the call, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but a release of some of the anger I had been carrying toward her. She had been complicit in Donovan's betrayal, yes, but she had also been deceived by him, used by him, discarded by him. We were not friends. We would never be friends. But we were both survivors of the same predator. And there was something in acknowledging that shared experience that felt like closure. After I hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about forgiveness. I had been so focused on building the business, on proving Donovan wrong, on succeeding in spite of what he had done, that I had not really dealt with the emotional aftermath. I had thought that success would be enough, that winning would heal the wounds. And it had helped. But it was not the same as actually processing the betrayal, the grief, the loss of a marriage I had believed in. That evening, I did something I had been avoiding for 3 years. I went through the box of personal items I had brought back from Paris, things I had shoved into storage and never looked at again. Wedding photos, anniversary cards, mementos from trips we had taken together. See evidence of a relationship that had once been real, or at least I had believed it was real. I cried looking through those things. Not because I missed Donovan, I did not. The man in those photos was someone I had invented, someone I had wanted him to be, rather than who he actually was. But I cried for the version of myself in those photos, the woman who had trusted completely, who had believed in partnership, who had given everything to someone who saw her as disposable. I cried for the years I had lost. I cried for the dreams of a family and a shared future that had died in that Paris hotel room. And then I put the box away, and I let myself feel the grief fully. And when I was done, I felt lighter. Not healed completely. Healing was going to be a process, maybe a lifelong one, but lighter. I started dating again about 6 months after that. Nothing serious at first, just dinners and conversations, remembering what it felt like to connect with someone without the weight of betrayal and suspicion. I was cautious, maybe too cautious, but I was also intentional. I knew what I wanted now. I knew what I deserved, and I was not going to settle for less. I met someone eventually. His name was Isaiah Tremaine, and he was a professor of economics at Georgetown University. He was kind, thoughtful, brilliant in a quiet way that did not need to dominate every room. We met at a financial literacy nonprofit event where I was speaking about entrepreneurship, and he was on the board. We started talking and did not stop for 3 hours. Isaiah knew my story. The Forbes article had made it semi-public, and when we started dating seriously, I told him the rest. He listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, without making it about him. He just held space for my experience and told me he admired my strength. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something powerful, Isaiah said one evening as we walked along the National Mall. That is not revenge, Elizabeth. That is alchemy. I liked that. Alchemy. Transforming pain into power, betrayal into wisdom, loss into growth. We got married 2 years later, a small ceremony with close friends and family. Nothing like the elaborate affair Donovan had insisted on for our wedding. This wedding was mine. Ours. A celebration of two people choosing each other with full knowledge and full honesty. 5 years after Paris, Joe Morrison Renee Strategic Partners was one of the top financial services firms in the country. We had offices in 5 cities, over 100 employees, and annual revenue exceeding $100 million. I had been invited to speak at conferences, to advise startup founders, to serve on boards. I had become exactly what Donovan had told me I could never be. Successful on my own, respected, powerful, but the success was not what mattered most. What mattered was that I had learned something crucial standing in that airport in Paris with nothing but a suitcase and a phone. I had learned that I was enough, that I had always been enough, that Donovan's assessment of my worth had been a reflection of his limitations, not mine, that the power to rebuild, to fight back, to create something better, had been inside me the whole time. I thought about that night in Paris often, about the choice I had made. I could have gotten on that plane. I could have gone home defeated. I could have accepted whatever settlement Donovan decided to give me and started over with nothing. A lot of people would have. A lot of people would have been too hurt, too scared, too overwhelmed to fight. But I had fought. And I had won. Not just the company, though that mattered. I had won myself back, my confidence, my sense of worth, my future. One afternoon, about 6 years after everything had happened, I was in my office when my assistant told me there was someone in the lobby asking to see me without an appointment. A man named Donovan Morrison. I almost said no. I had not seen or spoken to Donovan since that conference room in Paris. We had no reason to interact. Our divorce had been finalized years ago. He had no claim to the company. There was nothing left between us but history. But curiosity won out again. "Send him in," I said. Donovan walked into my office, looking older than I remembered. He was still handsome, but the cockiness was gone. He looked like a man who had lost something he only appreciated after it was gone. "Elizabeth," he said, and there was something uncertain in his voice. "Thank you for seeing me." "You have 5 minutes," I said. "What do you want?" Donovan sat down in the chair across from my desk. "I have been thinking about what happened between us, about what I did, and I wanted to tell you in person that I was wrong. About everything. You were never just assistants. You were never less talented. So I told myself those things because it made it easier to justify what I was doing. But they were lies. You were always my equal, maybe my better, and I was too arrogant to see it." I sat back in my chair and studied him. "Why are you telling me this now? Why does it matter?" "Because I owe you the truth," Donovan said, "and because I have spent 6 years watching you build something extraordinary while I have struggled to get anything off the ground. Every venture I have tried has failed. Every partnership has collapsed. And I finally realized why. I do not know how to collaborate. I do not know how to value people. I do not know how to build something with someone instead of taking from them. You knew how to do all of that. The company we built, it was great because of you, not in spite of you. And I threw that away because I was too stupid and too arrogant to recognize what I had." I let his words sit for a moment. Then I said, "I appreciate you saying that. I do. But it does not change what happened. It does not undo the damage you did." "I know," Donovan said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. And I was wrong." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Donovan stood. "I will let you get back to work. Thank you for seeing me, Elizabeth. I mean that." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "For what it is worth, I am proud of what you have built here. You deserve all of it." After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about forgiveness. I had told Simone I was working toward it on my own timeline. But what did forgiveness actually mean? Did it mean absolving Donovan of responsibility for what he did? Did it mean pretending the betrayal did not hurt? Did it mean welcoming him back into my life in some capacity? I did not think so. I thought forgiveness meant something different. It meant releasing the grip that anger and resentment had on my heart. It meant acknowledging that what Donovan did was about his character, not my worth. It meant choosing not to carry the weight of his betrayal into my future. I did forgive him, eventually. Not in a dramatic moment of reconciliation, but quietly, over time, in the privacy of my own healing. I forgave him because holding on to the anger was exhausting, and because I had better things to do with my energy than hate a man who was no longer relevant to my life. But forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not mean trusting him. It did not mean giving him credit for my success or allowing him back into my world. It just meant that I was no longer letting what he did define who I was. 7 years after that night in Paris, I stood in front of a room full of women entrepreneurs at a conference in New York City. I had been invited to give a keynote about overcoming setbacks and building businesses against the odds. I told my story, the whole story, holding nothing back. I talked about the betrayal, the fear, the moment in the airport when I had to decide whether to fight or surrender. And I talked about what I had learned, that your worth is not determined by someone else's assessment of you. That underestimation can be an advantage if you use it correctly. That the people who dismiss you are often the same people who will underestimate you, and that creates opportunities. That fighting back is not about revenge, it is about justice. It is about refusing to accept a narrative that diminishes you. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me with tears in their eyes, telling me their own stories of being underestimated, betrayed, dismissed. Telling me that hearing my story gave them courage to fight their own battles. That, I realized, was the point of all of it. Not just rebuilding my company or proving Donovan wrong, but showing other women that it was possible to survive betrayal, to fight back against injustice, to build something extraordinary from the ashes of what was destroyed. I had walked into that Paris airport 7 years ago with nothing but a suitcase, a phone, and a choice. I could have gone home defeated. Instead, I hired a lawyer, froze the accounts, called the clients, filed the injunctions, and fought. 72 hours later, I owned the company. But more than that, 72 hours later, I had reclaimed myself, my power, my future, my story. And that, I thought, was the real victory. Not revenge, not even justice, though justice mattered. The real victory was knowing that I was strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to fight strategically, and worthy enough to demand what I deserved. I looked out at those women in the audience, and I saw myself in their faces. I saw the doubt and the fear and the hope, and I wanted them to know what I knew now. You are enough. You have always been enough. And if someone tries to take what is yours, you fight. You fight smart, you fight hard, and you do not stop until you win. Because you deserve to win. We all do. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you fight back against the people who underestimated you, you do not just survive, you triumph.